Hey ladies and gentlemen, so today I'm going to be looking at operant conditioning and the components associated with it. So operant conditioning is a type of learning where the consequences of a particular behavior determine the likelihood that it will be performed again. So essentially we're trying to work out whether or not reinforcement or punishment will actually affect your behavior and whether or not you will do that again. So an operant is any behavior that acts on the environment to produce some kind of response. So essentially the operant is what behavior is actually conducted. Now, the three-phase model of operant conditioning, and this comes up quite a lot on exams, so make sure that you understand what it is. So the antecedent is a stimulus that occurs before the behavior. An example could be, I've asked Johnny to mow my lawn. So that would be the antecedent. Right? The behavior would be a voluntary behavior by the individual, and voluntary being the word you need to use, that occurs due to the antecedent stimulus. Because I've asked Johnny to mow the lawn, his behavior is to mow the lawn. As a consequence of the behavior, I'm going to give Johnny money. So the consequence of money has an effect on whether or not the behavior will happen again. So a certain antecedent stimulus prompts behavior that is followed by a specific consequence. So in operant conditioning, there is a reinforcement. So reinforcement occurs when a stimulus increases the frequency or likelihood of a response that it follows. A reinforcer is any stimulus that strengthens the likelihood of a response. A positive reinforcer is a stimulus that strengthens the frequency of the desired response, and it involves giving a positive reinforcer after the desired response has been given. So in the previous example, Johnny mowed my lawns. As a positive reinforcement, I gave him money. It could be when you're training a dog, you might be giving them a treat every time they sit, giving a child pocket money for doing their chores. It might be every time you get an A, you get a car. Funnily enough, I did have a student who used to, the parents pretty much turned around and said that if you get 90 for an 8R or above, we'll buy you a brand new car. He never got a brand new car, but it was there. So a negative reinforcer still strengthens the frequency of the desired response. It isn't removing an unpleasant stimulus. So you're removing an unpleasant stimulus that you don't actually like. Right? So negative reinforcements involves the removal of an unpleasant stimulus in order to strengthen the behavior. Whenever you see the word reinforcement, you need to remember that it strengthens the likelihood that you'll do it again. So you might use an umbrella to avoid the rain because the rain is unpleasant. You might take a painkiller in order to remove the pain of a headache. These are the sort of things you need to remember. Where people lose marks is because they assume that negative reinforcement is something negative, something bad. But all the negative is referring to is the removal of something. So you're taking away. Think of it like maths. Positive is adding something, and negative is removing or subtracting something. Reinforcement aims to strengthen the behavior. They're only ever used after the correct behavior is made. Positive reinforcers are given, negative reinforcers are removed. So the opposite of reinforcement would be punishment. So punishment is delivery of unpleasant consequence following a behavior, or the removal of a pleasant consequence of behavior. Positive punishment means you're adding a punishment. So you don't do your homework, I give you a detention, right? You're running extra laps because you're late to training. You do extra chores for swearing at your parents. So positive punishment involves the introduction or adding of a stimulus and weakens the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. Negative punishment involves the removal or loss of a stimulus, which weakens the likelihood of the response occurring again. So let's say, for example, you didn't study for your SAC and you got a bad score. Your parents find out, so they remove your phone, which you like, in order for as punishment for your poor work. So all punishment weakens behavior. Reinforcement strengthens, punishment weakens. Now, a part of this is response cost, and it's very similar to negative punishment. So the response cost is the thing that is lost due to negative punishment. For example, if you fail to do your chores at home and you lose your mobile phone as a result, the phone is the response cost. If you receive a speeding fine, then the money you have to pay is the response cost. So, and VCAL likes to include this one in exams, mainly because it confuses so many people. I like to think of it as it's the punishment or the thing that's removed that doesn't necessarily have to do with why you got it. I know that sounds confusing. Let's say, for example, I'm speeding down the road and I'm going 20 over the speed limit, naughty me, and a police officer pulls me over and he gives me a fine. Now, money has nothing to do with me speeding at all, but I'm being fined for it, so it's arbitrary. But that is the response cost. So for me speeding, I lose money. That's the cost to me for my responses. Same sort of thing with the losing your mobile phone because you didn't study. Actually, that could be related. Let's try a different one. Perhaps you're going to lose your dessert privileges because you didn't wash the dishes, right? Losing your dessert is a response cost because it's cost you your dessert because of your response of not doing the dishes. It doesn't, more often than not, response cost relates to money. This particular one here is a question that they tend to bring up a lot in SACs and exams. All right, so this is just pretty much a way of looking at it. It's on the internet. There's tons of these. Go look one up. You'll find a better one. All right, so operant conditioning tends to have similar sort of terminology as classical conditioning, but it's a slightly different. So stimulus generalization occurs when the correct behavior response is made to another stimulus that is similar to the stimulus that was present when the condition response was reinforced. So let's say, for example, you know that I give you chocolates every time you get a good mark or you get something correct, and you think that all teachers will give you the same thing. So that would be stimulus generalization. Stimulus discrimination is when you know that you're making the correct response or behavior to that particular stimulus or person or whatever only. You don't respond to any others. So, for example, you know that Miss Irving gives you chocolate for every correct answer, so you don't actually do it to other teachers because you've learned that she's the only one who does it. Extinction is the slow decrease in the strength or rate of a conditioned response. So let's say, for example, you cook dinner for your parents every night of the week. And every night of the week, your parents go, "That's fantastic, well done." In the last 3 nights, though, they haven't said anything. They've just assumed, okay, well, she's cooking us dinner. So because you're no longer getting reinforced, that whole idea of cooking dinner for your family gets extinguished because you're no longer being reinforced for your wonderful cooking skills. Spontaneous recovery occurs after extinction. And this is when a person or an animal shows the desired response again, despite the fact that they're not being reinforced for it. They generally have the idea, oh, maybe I might be reinforced. All right, this is the last slide. And it's really important to note the differences between classical and operant conditioning. I've seen numerous exams that have the question outline the differences between classical and operant conditioning. You must have certain words included. Right, you need to note the fact that operant conditioning is voluntary, so you choose to do it. I could teach you how to make spaghetti bolognese and reward you for it every single time. But if you don't want to do it, you're not going to. You're also going to be active. You actively pay attention. You actively decide, is that punishment or consequence or reinforcement, something that I actually want, need, desire? Consequences determine whether behavior is strengthened or weakened. So consequences is all to do with operant conditioning. With classical conditioning, it is involuntary and it is a reflex response. And the learner is passive. So make sure you at least have those ones. There are lots more differences, but stick with those ones to begin with if you can't focus on anything else. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.